Gillette, Penn and Teller. Big guy does magic, smaller guy next to me, he does magic too. He doesn't talk that much. Anyway, I wanted to welcome you to In Time. Welcome you all to In Time with Nick. Love you all. Peace. Go get him, Nick.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter, and with me today is Andring with an E. How are you, good sir?
I'm hot. Nevada's very hot.
Yeah, well, I, that's fine. But if you want to talk about, we don't need to. You don't need to get into. Oh, you're hot. That's fine. We all agree. I'm sure. You're a guy, so I don't look at those things. I'm just saying. It's
the only time I get to say I'm hot. So.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly the only time. If you're in Nevada, it's certainly the only time anyone's going to believe you. So.
True.
I have the same problem. We were talking about that before the show. It's like you get married and then all of a sudden, but for no reason at all, I guess. But okay, you're in Nevada. That's good. So. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing an overtime. Joe Serious Mind is going to be joining us for that. We're going to be discussing a number of things. What's his name? Abbott got COVID today, or tested positive for COVID today, Governor Greg Abbott of Texas. And that's an interesting one because he's actually been vaccinated, so it's a breakthrough case. What that also means is he had no symptoms, and he was at a major fundraiser yesterday, so he's presumably been passing that on because he is against masks and actually required by it couldn't have been an act of law, but I guess by government, by, what do you call it? Oh, dear Lord, when you sign a declaration or whatever.
Executive order.
Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. And yes, it's 2 words. You're keeping your smart ass in check, so I appreciate that. So he signed an executive order basically saying that none of the counties or municipalities could actually force a mask mandate. So we got that situation. And then, of course, here was the interesting thing, which I just realized. Yep, and great, you're getting up, and hey, you were right about the pants thing, so that's perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hold
I
on.
love my plaid pants.
I got a phone call.
I put them on just for you.
You too. Oh, you have been demonetized in perpetuity. Okay. So, yeah, thank you for that. It's well understood that my $400 suits cost half as much because, well, I only have to buy half the suit. But that's also why I don't get up.
Oh, come on!
The show.
I actually put on my cool plaid PJs for you.
I am honored. I am so pleased. Thank you so much. I'm thrilled. So, but I just learned you were actually in the area when when September 11th happened, and during the start of the war in Afghanistan. So yesterday, Afghan fell, and I've said that a couple times, and people are like, "What does that mean?" Well, that means there's no government anymore. There's no U.S. embassy anymore. It's all gone. The Taliban owns all of it. So I'd like to bring out tonight, we're going to be doing a call-in show with Marianne Ono, who has already done one show on Christian atheism and post. Wow. Sorry. Okay. I'll already forgot the. Excuse me. So on Christian atheism and post-theism. That's the word I was looking for. So we'll do a call-in show with her. I'm looking forward to getting that underway. She's waiting in the green room there. But I did want to, before we start, just ask you what were your thoughts when you heard that Afghanistan had fallen?
Well, it's a little surreal to think that after everything that's happened, for it to end this way. I didn't really think it was going to end any other way unless we wanted to maintain a presence there in perpetuity. Seems to be the buzzword of the last year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when it started, we had a very different mission, and the mission ended up morphing over time, as things generally do. You end up with mission creep, and the last decade of what was going on in Afghanistan was very, very different than what the first couple of years was. But it seems kind of weird. It's been going on for so long. It's almost been a staple of it's like I have a niece that for as long as she's been alive, that war's been going on. So it seems kind of weird that it's kind of sort of done, and doesn't seem like we really care about the promises made to the Afghanistan people. And
well, especially the women. I got very triggered about this when we were doing it, and I still am. I'm actually extraordinarily angry about it. But if for me, it's the hypocrisy. I remember when we went into Iraq, we got to get Saddam Hussein. He gassed 10,000 of his people. We're gonna go save these innocent people because we're Americans and that's what we do. It's like, you do realize there's mass genocide in Darfur, and Saddam Hussein killed 10,000 of his people 10 years ago. That's a lot, but 10,000 people died a month ago in Darfur. Maybe we should go there, and now half of the entire country of Afghanistan is going to be enslaved. It's not a joke, it's slavery. Really, that I can tell, nobody cares. And there may or may not be a solution to it. I don't know. I think you brought up a good point. But honestly, it just pisses me off how few people care. And it's just a lot of lives lost for nothing.
Yeah, I didn't particularly agree with the way that the mission had eventually morphed into what we were actually doing there. When I was there at the very beginning of the war, I was part of I was in the Navy at the time. I was in the battle group that began that war. We sent the first airstrikes, the first guided missile strikes into Afghanistan from our battle group. And of course, September 11th had just happened. There was still that righteous anger. Whether it was completely justified or not, we still had a fire under our ass, and we felt like what we were doing was right and good. Things, I've grown a little since then, so things are never quite so black and white as we like to make them out. They're never as simple as we seem to think they are. But when we went in there, we were going after Al-Qaeda. We were going after bin Laden. We were going to dismantle their infrastructure, their supplies. We were going after them. That was what we were supposed to be doing. And it changed quite a bit after getting in, and got very, very involved, and eventually started propping up Afghanistan, hoping they could become their own country, self-sufficient country. I think that was a little misguided. I don't believe that without our continued support and help, direct intervention, as in staying there forever to protect the government, that it was going to last. So it got to a point where there were only two options: either end horribly, kind of, which it has done, or stay there for the rest of eternity, essentially annex Afghanistan and make it like Puerto Rico or the Virgin Islands, make it a territory of the United States, and then we could ensure. I think it sucks because there's a lot of civilians, a lot of people over there that put their trust in the United States and went out on a limb, and now that we've just said, okay, peace out, their lives are pretty much forfeit. If they can't get out, then they're screwed. And it just sucks.
So welcome to the happy, fun, in time hour. Yeah, it does. What I'd like to do, actually, yeah. So what I'd like to do is, if at some point you find you have time this week or next, we're actually scheduled next week. We're going to have on Pat, he's a historian. He's going to be discussing the history of this. But I'd love to just chat, you and I, if you have a little time. We'll schedule something in the next couple of weeks just to chat about it, because it's rare that we have someone we can talk to who's experienced this close up. And we do have a super chat. So let me read that. This is one of those weird super chats. These ones are always, so let me see if I can find it. Oh, yeah. The super chat is from Nicholas Lamar Soutter. And Mr. Soutter has actually sponsored another person's post as super chat. He sponsored a post by the Sinister Porpies. And Porpies says, quote, I find Isandering as hot as my ice cube trays.
My ice cube. I saw that. That was hilarious.
Yeah,
That's a good one. I'm gonna have to remember that one.
Yeah, I think Mr. Soutter just wanted to make sure that, I think he likes platforming voices that aren't heard often. So, yeah, all right. So
have people speaking truth to power too.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't want to drown out those truthful voices.
Today is we've got a call-in show, so anyone who wants to ask questions, we ran long last time we had Marianne here. We were discussing post-theism and Christian atheism, and how does this work? What are these concepts? There are some great questions, and there was some really great discussion in the Discord afterwards, and we decided we should have her back to finish grilling her, because she's one of those shifty, evasive ones that kind of wants it both ways, I guess, and also to let other people ask her about her views. So the number is up for anybody who wants to call it. You'll see it down below. Also, actually, when I get a moment, I will put it in the description so people can call in. But in the meantime, and again, I just wanted to clarify, she is in fact a Christian atheist herself, which is what makes her an expert on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little voodoo here, which is I'm going to open up her window and welcome Marianne Ono as I kind of hide mine. And yeah, I'm not there anymore, so I'm ducking. So because nobody would have actually called her a Christian atheist, and no, that would be a mean thing to do. Marianne, how are you?
I'm good. I'm not a Christian atheist, but I'm good.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not even here. This thing shields me from all. You see, when this thing's up, it's like I'm invulnerable. I can say anything I want to, and I can't get. So
anyway, yeah. Thanks for having me back.
Well, thank you so much for coming. So now, you. Well, why don't you instead of me sort of explaining your beliefs for you, which would be somewhat rude, but that's never stopped me.
It would
before.
be entertaining.
It's never stopped me before. So what are your views in this regard? You stir up a lot of trouble because you talk about at least that.
Yes. I upset everyone of every possible combination of views, pretty much. Yeah, unless they pretty closely aligned with mine.
I'm done. Yeah. I can't take this anymore. Can't do this anymore.
Just so folks know, am I supposed to call you Xander? What am I supposed to call you?
Anything but late for dinner.
No, yeah, but okay. All right, we'll go with that. He and I had a really long chat, actually, in the Discord after the last show. Not the one I missed. I just want to take the opportunity to say that what we're doing tonight was supposed to happen, maybe a month ago. I'm not sure exactly. And yeah, something came up at the very last minute and got me distracted, and then that was my fault. I just got distracted and didn't show until hours later when I said, oh my God. So apologies to anyone who was here, and hello to anyone who is new to all this. There is a previous show. I imagine Nick will post the link. And yeah, happy to be here. So, beliefs. You want me to go straight into that?
Yeah, since you've been on before, unless there's something else you wanted to cover, but and then the call-in number, anyone who wants to call in, it's 1-406-4 in time, and you can give us a call and tell us what you think. And yeah,
for anyone who's seen the previous episode, you might have noticed, you might not, I never said what I personally believe in. I talked about a particular phenomenon in the Christian community and a number of organizations around the world, whether they call themselves churches or not, that identify as either atheist or post-theist, or even people within an otherwise theist religion who identify as non-theist in some way. So I never really talked about my own beliefs, and I tend not to, but I have a feeling they're going to come up a lot with people's questions. So just to kind of sort that out. All right. My beliefs are informed by a pretty wide range of experience. So grew up Catholic. I've been involved to a fair extent in everything from the Catholic Church to the Quakers, which is about as far apart as you can go. I'm currently a member of the United Church of Canada. I attend a church that we spend most of our time actually deconstructing myths and looking for meaning that isn't necessarily supernaturalistic or whatever adjective you want to use, okay? Superstitious. So I'm more of a, for me, Christianity is more of a kind of touch point in my life where I find that a lot of what I have learned through that deconstruction is super useful. I also did a show on In Time about Fred Rogers and talked about how he's a touch point in my life, right? And how things that he's said and done really help when I'm kind of in a jam. So these touch points they're not directing what I'm to believe or not believe, but I find them useful. And I find Christianity useful in that sense. I'm not a theist per se. I use the word God. I tend to use it only around people who use it. My feeling is there's no sense in throwing up barriers between ourselves and nitpicking over words. So whether what I mean by it and what they mean by it are the same doesn't matter, as long as long as we're in general talking about the same thing. And I find that using whatever language I'm with, using the language of whoever I'm with, kind of eases that conversation. So I do use the word God, tend not to think of it myself, but I tend to use it in a fairly practical sense, and it can actually be, the way I define it, can be just as valid theistically or non-theistically. So because of that, I don't define as an atheist, because I'm using the word and I'm using it in a sense that could be taken theistically, and I don't mind. May not be what I mean by it. I consider myself a post-theist, and the previous show got into all that. Like, what do people mean when they say post-theist? Essentially, they mean we need to stop focusing on sort of the hard lines that divide us. Person X believes this, person Y believes that, but more kind of what are the commonalities and what can we take from religion and build on, without getting into all of those things that are quite often distractions from more important things we could be doing. So I guess that's very vague, and I'm often accused.
Yes,
Nick said that Nick said that I stir people up, and I do, because they try to pin me down, and I'm quite deliberately vague with myself as well as with them. I try to, why be narrow about something when you don't need to be? So I'm almost inclusive to a fault, and people find that irritating as hell, and they just keep hammering at, yeah, but what about? And I'm like, does it matter? And they're like, well, now now you're hiding something. Now you're whatever. So I understand it's frustrating. I want to acknowledge that. But my views are pretty widely inclusive and pretty practical. If I don't see a use for something, I don't care. So for just one example, and then I'll stop yammering and let Nick get a word in edgewise. I don't care if there's an afterlife or not. I see no reason to think there is. But I'm not going to go about denying it either. If people take comfort from the idea, fine. I personally don't. So, I mean, you ask me specifics like that and I'll answer them. But you just ask me like something general and I'll probably give you a vague answer. And I don't mean to be vague, but that's kind of the way I think.
Well, you see, that sounds to most of us like atheism. So and you've said before too, and I don't want to I do want to misquote you, but not in this one instance. Usually, I don't mind throwing you under the bus. In fact, I enjoy it. But you said before too that you don't even care if Jesus was real or not. So you seem to not necessarily, you don't identify as an atheist. If you identify as a Christian, I don't think
it matters. I just don't think those things matter.
So my point is that the argument that I've most commonly seen is, how can you say that you identify as a Christian in any meaningful way if you don't even care? Isn't the fact that Jesus was the Son of God kind of a... Now, I haven't read the Bible cover to cover, but last I checked, that's actually a little bit of an important point in the Bible. It's mentioned once or twice. And so if you don't even care, how can you identify as a Christian?
Let me draw an analogy. If you adore the works of Shakespeare, okay, and I don't mean you just enjoy reading them, but like there's lines that you've memorized because they mean something to you, and you find that some of the perspectives have really made you rethink in your life, and that's kind of a touch point for you. Does it really matter whether it was written by William Shakespeare, or, because this is a whole debate, right? or whether the man who we know historically existed, William Shakespeare, had nothing to do with it, and it was all pinned on him. We know that's true of much of the Bible, that it's pretty well consensus. I mean, there's always exceptions, but pretty well consensus that all the things attributed to Paul in the Bible are not from the same guy, that a lot of them were probably from his students, and it was kind of the fashion back then. It wasn't considered, lying. It was considered an homage to say this was written by and give the name of your teacher, rather than take the credit yourself. Does it matter that they were written by Paul or not? Does it matter whether the stuff attributed to Jesus was someone I could go back in a time machine and verify actually lived? I don't think so.
So I want to give Xander, he's paying very careful attention, and I'm not sure if that's because he's about to pounce, he's about to get you, or if it's because he's just like, I don't care.
Pounce, yes.
Why
is it whenever...
I'm sorry, what?
I always have to be pouncing on something. Have to be pouncing on something.
Yep.
One of the issues that I have is does it matter? It kind of does, because there's it may not matter to you, and in your you've constructed a life where something like that doesn't matter, but for all of the other Christians, it very much does matter. So I would say hang on, in the world of Christianity. Okay. Fair
enough. Across the Christian diaspora, the vast majority would seek, I think, from my small sampling tells me, would find Christianity pointless. If Jesus did not actually live and did not actually, if his death didn't actually kind of open the gates of heaven by cleansing us of our sins, yada, yada. I'll grant you that.
So
but I also
exception with the use of the word "all." So she agrees that the vast majority. I think she's you have to be precise, or else she's just like, you know what? So yeah.
Sorry, I'm an academic.
No, if Christ didn't exist and it doesn't really matter at all, then we just have Judaism. So why isn't everybody Jews?
Yeah,
instead?
Sure. Because he said, I didn't come to dispense. He didn't says, hang on, present tense. I got to make a point there. Present tense allows for the possibility that this is fiction. So if I say Harry Potter says, right, then I'm talking about what the character says. If I say Harry Potter said, to some, that's making a historical statement. So I tend to use the present tense. I think that's important in this conversation. Anyway, Jesus says, so please keep that in mind. Whenever I say Jesus says, there's that hole, I'm leaving that open. Because I don't want to keep litigating this point. Jesus says something about, I come not to, depending on your translation, replace the law, right? So not to replace Judaism. And the fact that Christianity spun off as an entire religion of its own, So I'm agreeing with you. We would have Judaism.
It specifically says, in the Bible, it specifically says he's not here to change one jot or tittle of the law. It all still applies.
Yeah.
One of the things that one of my kind of questions is I can understand people finding inspirational things in the Bible. And I'm sure that there's probably many works that people would consider possibly atrocious overall, but makes at least some good points somewhere that, if you were to take just this one little passage out of context, out of the entire rest of it, and just use that one context, it would be a good statement to have.
Sure.
What I kind of wonder is if you don't particularly care so much about whether Jesus was a real person. You've found some meaning in your life based off of certain things that are found in Christianity. But is it, considering that most people aren't going to throw away all of the other bad stuff, there isn't a huge amount of baggage around most religions, especially Christianity. Is it worthwhile to kind of hold that up, or just say, no, we should really just move away from there? There were some good ideas, and many of these good ideas are also in other places, and maybe we should pull from them and kind of get rid of, because if you were to take a literal translation of the Bible and try and live your life that way, literally following the Bible, in just about every country in the world, you would be put in prison for that. And we'd end up with
a guy did
more
and
like
wrote a
Westboro
book, right?
Baptist churches. Yeah,
I
well,
kind of did
there's
that.
one that I thought was interesting. Yeah, there's a book called The
Um,
Year of Living Biblically, and he was a
yeah,
Jewish guy, so
that's what I'm talking
he
about.
just got rid of that. Yeah, I've got that on audio.
Yeah.
It's a pretty funny book.
hmm
I'm just wondering the usefulness of
it's a good point.
continuing with something like that, or just get rid of it entirely and say, well, there's plenty of other places where we see these good ideas, because good ideas tend to persevere and they tend to crop up everywhere because, well, they're good ideas.
Yeah.
So instead of just drop the dogma of, or the baggage associated with any religion at all, not just Christianity, but any of them.
So is your point, because I'm hearing several points, and I kind of have to pick one to answer, at least first.
Sure.
Is your point more that since these things can be found everywhere else, we need to be inclusive and not say, I align with X, but I align with a number of things, or a number of things speak to me? Is that it? Or is it more that, hey, if you want to take most of your inspiration from X, then Christianity in this case, then why do you need to use the word Christian? Why do you need to basically take on all the baggage that comes with that, as opposed to just using it as a kind of reference? You see what I'm saying? One is about how inclusive are we, and the other one is about how much baggage do we want to take with us.
Right, and I believe that there's quite a lot of very bad baggage associated with most organized religions, and Christianity in particular, since that's what generally affects us in North America. So it's because of the fact that there are so many other people out there that cling to the truthfulness, or to the claim of truthfulness to the whole thing, and can lead to children being indoctrinated into a culture of exclusion because, oh, God doesn't like those gay people, or God doesn't like those trans people. Can be a huge problem with that, and I would rather see that just entirely go away, and say, and find the areas other than in Christianity that have the same kinds of good ideas, and focus on those parts, and try and just get rid of Christianity at all. I personally don't have any problem with the way that you view Christianity, or the way that you're claiming it. I think that it's perfectly fine and probably healthy for you to do so. Unfortunately, most Christians don't do that.
And I want to add, just because Titan said this, and I think it fits, quote, for those of us who hold the idea that false beliefs are inherently harmful, this distinction is very important. So I want to put that in, because I think...
Yes, okay. Okay, I can answer that. You probably won't be surprised to hear that it's one of the more common objections I hear, and I have a lot of sympathy with it. I mean, it's almost...
Which one, mine or Titan's?
No, well, he's sort of building on yours, but yours, yeah.
Okay.
And in fact, I draw a lot of analogies. You're going to have to put up with it. If you want a similar analogy, it's like, why would you choose to work with an actor who, has been accused or convicted of all kinds of horrific things when there's other excellent actors out there, right? Like, why do you choose to do something that causes harm to people, and you're perpetuating it by, for example, giving that person work? So, okay, is that a fair analogy, by the way?
So, somewhat, yeah. I mean, as far as analogies are never perfect, so, but I can get the. I see the parallel between the analogy. Okay,
I've got a few reasons, but I'll try to be brief, which is never easy for me, because I've always got caveats and things to add. I think...
Well, of course, things are never as simple as... Go ahead.
As you can get in a YouTube show, for sure. Which is why we have Discords afterwards and so on. Okay, so part of what bothers me a lot is how very little a lot of critics of Christianity know about the very long history of the sort of thing I'm talking about. Most people who hear the word Quaker think Amish, Quakers were really the ones who... I was in university when I started spending time, I wasn't really a member yet, but I started visiting Quaker meetings and learning, and completely blew my mind because I was coming out of Catholicism. Had no idea they existed, and I too thought they were like the Amish, to the point where, what attracted me to visit them in the first place... They don't do outreach, by the way. They're famous for not doing evangelism and outreach, but I guess, they were doing what I'm doing now and really trying to broaden people's perspectives. So they had put up a poster, again, unusually, on my campus that showed the Quaker Oats guy. And it just said, if this is your idea of a Quaker, you're welcome to check us out, which I did, and discovered that there's this Christian community that goes back hundreds of years. I think it's 1600s, but honestly, my dates are really shaky, to people who said, we're not about facts, we're about questions. And there is actually no settled dogma among Quakers. You can walk up to a Quaker and claim anything, and their answer will be, but why does that matter? Like, what's the practical meaning of that for you? Which is very much my attitude, which I learned from them. Their version of, they certainly have the Bible as a reference, but their version of, what would you call it? Sort of commonly agreed upon principles is actually a book of questions. It has very, very few answers. And the answers they have are very general around, this is what we think of peace. But they also say, like, how that plays out in each individual's life. If someone wants to be a Quaker and serve in the military, we don't say you can't do that. But we ask the questions, have you considered this, that, and the other? So, like, that's very much my approach. And what frustrates me, and why I align with Christianity to a large part, is because that whole world, it's not just the Quakers, by the way. That's the one I know best. But there's many groups like this. That whole world is largely invisible to critics, and invisible to what you might call mainstream Christians. And I find that even identifying myself as Christian, there are other reasons, okay? But even identifying myself as Christian opens that conversation, and I'm able to kind of introduce that world to people who are entirely unfamiliar with it, which I love doing. I love encouraging people to broaden their horizons. I think I'd lose a lot of that if I didn't align as Christian. And I find the whole word Christian problematic. I find Paul problematic, and a lot of what's understood to be Christianity is from Paul. So I'm sitting uncomfortably with the label, but because it has so much meaning in my life, because I'm part of a Christian community here in Toronto who share a lot of my views, and because I'm so aware of that Christian, it's not fringe. I mean, it's a much smaller percentage of people, but it's well-established, as I said, for hundreds of years, that's become invisible because the loudest people get the mic, and frankly, that pisses me off. Miles can tell you, I hate it when people gain power and dominance simply by screaming the loudest. And so when I see the kind of abuse, like Westboro Baptist Church and the, God hates fags and the rest of it, I say to myself, if those of us who are carrying forward these traditions of hundreds of years and are like-minded all step away and say we're leaving because of because the majority don't fit in that mold, then what we do is hand the mic over. Like, then there's no contest for it. And I think it actually makes the problem worse. So that's a very long, rambling answer. But did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. I think you had a question in the chat.
What you're saying is...
yeah, we did, and I muted myself, and muting myself is always dangerous because I forget to unmute. Yeah, we did have a question. Jake 4D, $2. Can you define God in the way that you use it?
Okay, can I put a hold on that just for a minute, because here's what I want to do.
Here we go. You see, this is why she draws so much heat, and people are like, oh, well, you're equivocating and you're changing turn. You see what I mean? Okay, yeah.
No, they say if you can't answer that instantly, then you're hiding something. Here's what I want to do. I have put so bloody much time, like years of time, into formulating that and coming up with an expression of it I'm comfortable with. And even though I've almost got it memorized, I'm not someone who memorizes well. So I'm going to go pull up my own Twitter feed and find it and read it, if that's okay. Because I feel like I've put so much effort into it. That's why I just want a minute. So why don't we go ahead, and as soon as I find it, we'll do that. I'm not equivocating. Yeah. I'm not dodging the question. Is that fair?
Well, this brings up a good point anyway that I wanted to kind of discuss, and I think Xander and I could talk about. We have the Tons of Trolls is in the live chat. Welcome, Tons of Trolls. He's I thought you meant like lots of I've hidden him.
But no, okay.
It's a guy. It's tons of trolls, and I've hidden him more than once. And somebody on the team seems to keep on hiding him. I haven't figured out who it is, but he's at any rate he caught a surreptitious snapshot, and we've sent a legal team after it. We haven't heard back. But what I think is interesting. First of all, you do something really silly. But I do the same thing, so I have to give some margin, which is you seem to think that a genuine conversation can be had on Twitter. And I'm actually, I put that kind of tongue in cheek, but the reality is, and we've had this discussion before, Twitter, the character limit is designed explicitly to cause fights. That's not a joke. When they decided to increase the character limit, they decided to increase it specifically to a point where you could maximize how much you could say, but minimize comprehension of it, so that people would be more likely to strawman, more likely to argue. When people argue, they're more likely to engage. You know, how many people sort of rage on Twitter, and this is how they sell advertising. So Twitter is designed to kill nuance and cause fights. And so I've seen a lot now, and I did want to just point out so that people know, because I give all our guests a little bit of a hard time, and I joke around. It's always friendly. But you and I have known each other, I think, now for going on about, excuse me, about 5 years. As a guest, that's just like one heck of a guess, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's that to within a year or two. You know, I've seen a lot of this, and you do always say, could you give me a moment to think about an answer?
Yes.
And I've seen
people hate that so much.
I haven't seen anything. You could sit there and post a picture of Jesus getting rammed with a dildo. Did I just? Okay, I'm not going to say that because I'm trying not to demonetize
I don't mind.
But people, yeah, well, I want to see if we can get a little monetization for this. But you could show that and draw less hate than when you say, let me think. Let me think. And even when you grant that it's a good point, and you grant that the reason you have to think is because they've said something you haven't yet thought about, and you're not actually claiming to know all the answers. So I just, Twitter is not the place for that, and I don't really know why. I think if you're a masochist, that would explain a heck of a lot. But Twitter is not the place to do that. But while you go look that up, and then I do want to see what Xandering's thought on that is, because it's something that's missing in discourse, which is the idea of letting someone else speak. Hold on, I'm not done yet. Jesus, the idea in discourse is letting someone else speak. Hello. Sorry, where were you going?
I was going to say, I've actually found where you were. Yeah. Now, I've actually found the thread where I'm giving all sort of the background of how I led to the definition. Now I'm trying to find the definition itself, but I think that's actually an interesting thread on its own. Is it okay if I post the link?
Please do. You're more than welcome to post the link. You probably won't be able to post it until you're modded. I will mod you. So just say something in the live chat.
No, I can.
Oh, okay, perfect.
I can, because I've been subscribed long enough. Apparently, if you're subscribed more than 5 minutes, you can post something, yes?
Yeah, I know we have
or not
low
links.
Standards, but you can talk, but it's posting. But I can mod you for that. But we also, while we're waiting, Sinister Porpoise, $2 super chat. There's only one troll in the cat, solipsists unite. That may have been a typo. If it is, I'm not. There's only one troll. Oh, in the chat. It was chat. One troll in the chat. Solipsists unite. Sinister is the host, co-host, and guest for tonight. Thank you.
We can go ahead. Like I will find this, but it's just I talk about it so much, and I have to explain so much that when I search on Twitter, I'm pulling up hundreds and hundreds of tweets. It's harder than you might think to actually find this.
So is Andrew, your thoughts? How much time have you spent on Twitter? I see you on every now and then. Your thoughts on Twitter? I mean, I think it's a cesspool, but I don't. You
know, it is. I mean, every once in a while there's a couple of people that I've followed. Like I follow Neil deGrasse Tyson. I follow NASA. I don't follow like celebrities or anything like that. People who have interesting things. I don't really engage on Twitter. I don't really. I just don't mess with Twitter hardly at all. The only reason I even made a Twitter handle was just so somebody couldn't take Isandering for a name. So I don't really do anything on there. I don't know that it's done positive things to discourse, but I'm not entirely sure that it was as you said, was really designed. It was designed to get people interacting, and it's turned out, in my opinion, that most of the interactions end up being more negative than positive. I mean, I've seen some pretty nasty cesspools of stuff on Twitter, and it's not particularly great for constructive discourse between people.
Well, I have a tendency to, no matter how many times I hear that, and no matter how many times I am made crystal clearly aware of that, to keep trying for one reason or another. And if there's any faith in, if there's any faith, if there's, I just completely lost my train of thought. If there's been anything that might exonerate my faith in that, it hasn't really happened yet. I think we, of course, all project in the conversation whatever we believe and expect. And mine, for some strange reason, is that people actually want to have that conversation. So I try to have it. And so far, I think there's probably been a few cases, rare cases, where I come away saying, I think we've made some progress, but it's been rare. Now, I followed Marianne for a while, and every now and then we engage. She has an annoying habit of, she says something, she gets completely, she gets hit by people on both sides. The Christians saying, you're not a true Christian, stop saying that, and you're destroying Christianity. And the atheists saying, you are a true Christian, stop saying that, you don't, that doesn't matter whether or not God, Jesus was like so. And then middle of the road saying, what? You're gaslighting.
Then there's the third group that are like, stop saying you're a Christian because you're clearly not.
Yes.
So yeah, I can
oh,
see
yes.
where.
Oh yeah.
And they say she's
I get it from
she's just a
everybody.
troll. She's doing it deliberately.
Yep.
She's just doing it to get. Which I'm sitting there going like, no. She is this annoying by nature. This is just this is how she is built.
Yes.
But then
I am a troll who is sincere. Yes.
I come in and say, listen, she sees something she doesn't agree with, and she has to point it out. She's just that way. He'll do that on occasion. You got to let her go with it. And then she'll say, Nick, you said he in the third sentence there, and you really meant she. You know what?
Shut up.
Do we have to have this discussion right now? I'm coming in here to point out that you're actually a decent human. Okay, never mind. The number of times that happens that she jumps on my ass, it's just like.
To be fair, I mean, I don't usually. I've come to accept your typos and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, you've taught me a lot about when people use voice to text and how like ableist it is to jump on people for their spelling and that kind of stuff. Like I've actually passed a lot of that on, quite sincerely. But you have to admit, like if you say something that is meant in defense of me but makes a point that I don't agree with. I mean, basically, I'll call it.
You won't hesitate.
No, but this is true. Like I mostly talk with atheists. It's kind of funny how that came to be. Actually, there's a whole story there. But I mostly talk with atheists. But when I talk with Christians, it's the same, or people of any religion. Like I'm always looking for clarity. And when I find that people are either being unclear or taking, running off on tangents with ideas that, how do I say this? Reading what someone wrote and instead of responding to that, running off with what they thought they said. Like I'm just constantly jumping in and saying, guys, can we all just kind of, speak clearly to each other? And if you've said something fairly clearly and I dispute it. And I often get like people who initially were kind of on my side in their mind. I hate sides, but I get, I thought we were on the same side, and are you really just here to beat up on whatever group they're a part of? So there's this sense that you got to pick a side and always agree with your side and always dispute the other, and that doesn't fly with me. But that's so much how Twitter is based, and that is my primary platform, that I'm just sadly kind of used to it.
I really
anyway.
am
I've got
to
this
get
definition.
you to get onto Discord. You need to get onto Discord. It's Twitter.
Oh well,
the
at the time No, really, the time I've spent on Discord has been so much better. But part of it is that if you're out to try to broaden people's perspectives, going to a place where they're already fairly broad is, you got to kind of go where the work is.
I want to ask
this
you
is not easy work. It's exhausting. But I tend to, and every once in a while, I'd say it's like 1-2% of the time, I've got someone who says, "You've got me thinking," and that's all I ever wanted. So to me, that's a win.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay, but you wanted
I want to hear it,
yeah.
but I want to ask a quick question. Just because it's you touched on it and it's a little ancillary, but I want to know, and I bet you most of the people in live chat want to know, in all of your discussions with atheists and Christians, and these are two very broad groups, and there's overlap and all this other stuff, but we're going to make huge generalizations. Have you noticed any differences that you can say as somebody who seems to be kind of down the middle that, you know, or are they just really the same, just different ideologies, but they're completely the same? Or have you noticed that atheists go about things in a certain way, Christians another way, or take very specific objections? What have you noticed?
Well, that gets into the funny story. The whole reason I started talking a lot to Christians all of a sudden on Twitter when I was fairly new to it was because I saw what Christians were posting and it drove me crazy. And I was like, I can't be around this craziness. I need to go talk to people who are rational. And I have the utmost respect for atheism, and I just thought people who identify as, you know, being rational, I am getting to the point here, identify as, you know, rational and evidence-based, I just kind of need that breathing space. And then I can, you know, talk to Christians or whoever. And I didn't find the breathing space. What I found was people who are as set in their perceptions and whose perceptions are often as limited when it comes to religion as the people who actually identify as religious. And I'm telling you, it pains me to say that. There are many exceptions. I've got lots of buddies. I mean, Nick here is one. Stephen Tiger's another. I could count like 30 or 40 people who I know I can talk to about religion, who someone who goes by me know who. MEKNOWHU is a good buddy of mine. We've had phone calls. And someone else who identifies as atheist and can really listen to what people are saying. But I find for the most part, that kind of listening for what they're expecting, or whether that's positive, like expecting agreement or expecting disagreement, and then running with it without, you know, and frankly being vicious, all of that, I don't see a difference. I wish I did. It's just in terms of the general atmosphere. It is not better.
Yeah.
Among atheists.
That ties back into, you know, we had Dr. Shook on before, very interesting guy talking about, I believe, not Dr. Shook, the other doctor we had on, about critical thinking and how important it was, and pointing out that even though a lot of, especially more atheists or people who label themselves more critical thinkers, can still tend to fall into the exact same traps of religious people, you know, with their biases and assumptions, and that way it's something you have to really strive hard to get yourself out of. You know, a lot of people tend to end up in echo chambers and reinforce, you know, look for reinforcing content. Our media platforms, our social media platforms, you know, like to use algorithms to give you things that they think that you want to look at. You know, that we have to constantly pry ourselves out of that and be aware that, you know, we have biases, and we need to look at things, you know, and we need to be able to listen to what other people have to say. You know, even if
everyone
a Christian
thinks they
comes up and says, "Hey, I need this," yeah, of course, everybody does, and they don't generally take kindly to you pointing out that they're not doing that.
No, people don't take kindly to their fundamental assumptions being challenged, and I think that's as true of whether it's politics, religion, you name it, of basically everyone I've seen on every topic. It's just across the board, people are uncomfortable and get aggressive. And sadly, that's also true among atheists. But it's just funny that I first went there for relief from that kind of behavior.
Yeah. Well, I think anytime that you challenge somebody's fundamental beliefs and they suddenly are now being asked to question, you know, what they've based their kind of worldview or based themselves or their lives around, you know, it can be very uncomfortable, and a lot of times people would rather take the easier way out and just not question their own base fundamental assumptions, or, you know, whatever indoctrination, because some people just have fundamental indoctrination because they haven't done any research. It's just how the way they were raised. That's how it's always been, and they just accept it. And when you try and push people away from that, or at least push them to find out if they've actually done any thinking about it, have a foundation of any kind of rational thought, about what they believe. You know, they tend to get a little
Yep.
worried about it, and they tend to react negatively. And I think it happens frequently enough across a broad spectrum of people that I truly believe that that's a part of the way that our brain is structured and works.
Yeah, one more thing, and I really do want to get back to this definition because I hate leaving questions hanging. I hate seeming like I'm avoiding them too. So I do have it in front of me now.
I wasn't going to let you
before I
go.
go there,
And Jake Fordy's
no, I
been
know.
a huge supporter, so I'm like he wants to know.
Oh, we can't piss off
get
your
there.
supporters. I mean,
Yep.
yeah, yeah, but oh well, now I've entirely forgotten what I was going to say.
Well, he had just.
No, about tribalism. I said I had one more thing to say, sort of on this thread of thinking, and then wanted to get back to that definition. But the thing I wanted to add is I see just as much tribalism as well. Oh, here comes my husband giving me water. Thank you, love. He's trying to be very quiet. Would you mind closing the door? Thank you.
Yeah, hold on.
So-
hold on.
Everybody's trying to be quiet, and I'm in an idling truck with noise everywhere.
I asked my wife to get me water once during a show. I was like, "Hon, could you just like?" And then there's this huge 3-gallon jug just thrown at my head. So I don't make that mistake anymore. But,
Thrown at your
anyway.
head.
Yeah.
Okay, so final point and then a definition. Final point is around tribalism. I also find that this is true, again, for religion, politics, everything. I'm not saying this is something special about religion, but I see it, as much, certainly on Twitter. That's, again, my main platform. Among the vocal atheist community is among the vocal religious folks. And what I mean by tribalism is kind of, it strikes me as almost reflexive. You watch what gets liked, what people are liking, because those pop up in your notifications on Twitter, like, so and so liked a tweet that was responding to you, and I just watch, like, blanket religious people like religious, something from a religious point of view, and atheists like something from an atheistic point of view, and that's fine until it goes off the rails. When people are saying like ridiculous things, I say the sky is blue, and they say, how dare you deny that sometimes it's black? And then I'm making this up, of course. And then I see like 50 likes pouring in. I'm like, are you guys thinking? Or are you simply saying, wow, this person's taken the piss out of a religious person and piling on? So I think that sort of groupthink is also just as bad. And it pains me to say it. I agree that there's a lot of human nature in that. I think there's a lot of comfort in it. And what comes with it is a unwillingness to call each other out on bad behavior. It's funny, actually. For all the abuse I get, I also get a lot of private messages from atheists who are buddies saying, man, that person was really ripping on you. I'm sorry you went through that. And I can be pretty blunt. I'm like, why didn't you speak up? Well, I've known them a long time, and, sometimes they say good things. And I'm just like, come on, can't we all get past that? Like, can't we talk to each other as adults? But anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean,
okay,
there's a
definition.
reason that
Yeah, there is a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, well, finish the thought, and then let's have her.
Oh, so there's a reason the quote, all it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. There's a reason that quote is still around today. There's a reason why it's all on posters and it's a motivational kind of quip, because it's true. I mean, if you stand by and do nothing, then there's nothing to stop the bad behavior.
Yeah. And it just happens so much, it drives me bananas. It's so incredibly rare for someone to speak up and say, you know what, I respect you, but you're out of line. It actually happened recently twice. Once, funny thing is, once in a religious, like, sort of, almost everyone in the conversation was religious, jumping on one person for a totally unreasonable statement. And once where almost everybody was an atheist, jumping on someone who was an atheist for a totally unreasonable statement. And I kind of sat back and thought, what happened that this never happens in like twice in a day? So it does happen in all communities, and I think it's equally bad as a problem in all communities. But okay, can we do this now?
Jake 4D, $2. Okay, perfect. Then we'll bounce it right back to you. Jake 4D, $2 super chat. Can you define God in the way that you use it?
Yes, it only took us like most of an hour to get there. And I'm going to read to you because, again, I've put a lot of work into this. Essentially, I use God as shorthand for that which enables us to build the world that Jesus envisions. And then I say, if someone wants to argue that that which enables us to build is a deity, that's fine by me. If they want to argue that it's a combination of evolved traits, nature, and experience, nurture, also okay. It seems like a pointless argument when we could be dealing with practical issues. Like, what do we do with that? Right? What do we do with, how do we build that world?
All right,
so I define God in the sense of, in the vague sense of that which enables us, but then in the specific sense of this particular set of skills focused on this particular task. And the reason, if I can throw in one more bit, the reason I initially thought of that particular approach is if you look at sort of the appearances of God, especially like dating back to the earlier books in the Bible. So I tend to call it the Hebrew Bible. There's problems with Old Testament. So you've got, you know, whether it's the burning bush or whether it's Samuel in the temple as a child, and he keeps waking up and hearing someone calling him and eventually says to a priest, "What is this?" And the answer is, "Oh, you know, maybe God's talking to you." All of those are calls to do something. And yeah, you get kind of the tablets from the mountain, but those are the exceptions. Generally, when you see appearances of God to people, it's like it's a call to a certain kind of behavior to correct certain problems in the world. And so that's kind of what I've pulled from it, from the Christian theology side of it. Is that's why I've defined God as that, wherever it's coming from, that which enables us to achieve those goals.
I do have one or two questions. I know Xandring is going to add a couple questions that he wants, and I'd much rather go to him. So go to him in a second. I do want to do two quick things. One, Sinister Porpoise says, talk to each other as adults. Has this person ever been on the internet? Fair question. And then the other thing I'd like to point out real quick is anybody who would like to call in, you can call in and talk to Marianne yourself. Come on, talk to each of us. The number is 1-4064 in time. Xandring had at least one point he wanted to make and probably has a few additional questions. So Xandring, what's on your mind? Xandring, I can't get myself out of that habit, but yes, Xandring, yes, please continue.
I had something. There was something I was going to say, and I got to thinking about the definition and forgot what I was going to say before that. I should probably write things down because I do that a lot.
We've been talking about. We've been talking about.
We can be patient.
If you either don't remember or would rather go forward or another one, we've been talking about tribalism. We've been talking about people not calling each other, not behaving as adults, and saying, "Well, he's a friend of mine, so I'm not necessarily gonna," But that's what we've been talking about.
Out when they should be.
Yeah. So why don't you? Yeah. And then you had given that excellent quote, which I think is spectacular, about all it takes for evil to survive is for good men to do nothing. So if you want to take another minute or two, and we actually do have a caller, but I really want to let you finish, and then we'll bring in the caller.
Well, I mean, throughout human history, right up until we started organizing around agriculture, all of the human race was tribal, and in order for a tribal species to exist, it needs to adhere to the tenets of that tribe, and then of course, the tribes with better tenets tend to live longer, and it builds a very strong fundamental tribal belief. And when you add that to the anonymity, because anonymity is the absolute destruction of tribes. As soon as you have anonymity, you're no longer held accountable for your own actions, and you can get away with bad actions. There's nothing to really hold you to those tenets of the tribe. So those two things tend to destroy each other. And when you add the fact that I still believe that nature, that the human race has evolved to be tribal, has evolved, specifically to be that, which is why we call it human nature. And then you add the anonymity of the internet, and you get all sorts of bad behavior. I think the internet and many social media sites bring out the absolute worst in us, though there are glowing spots of what humanity could be. The one question that I did have for you was, do you think that that the conversations and in the places that you're having these conversations are the best use of your time to promote what you're trying to promote? Or would trying to flush any kind of atheist or theist references at all, and just maybe go with humanist or something? Do you think that the approach that you're taking is the most efficient way to go about it, or do you think that there could possibly be a better way to reach more people and have more of an impact without getting, again, I always come back to the baggage, because there's just so much baggage, when you're especially dealing with anything religious.
It's a brilliant question, and frankly, it's one I ask myself all the time. Is this a good use of my time? And especially as, I take environmental issues very seriously. My family does a fair bit, not as much as we could, but a fair bit on the environmental front. Part of me is saying the world's burning. Like, what am I doing? Just, picking fights or letting people pick fights with me over niggly things. Just because, am I really even broadening anyone's perspective? The whole intent behind broadening perspective is really not religion, but based. The whole idea was, if I can get people thinking that what they've always heard may not be the whole story, then, maybe they may apply that to, everything from climate change and to everything else. But realistically, that's a lovely ideal. Realistically, I don't think I very often make a difference. There are a number of successes. I also talk climate change. I also talk vaccination. I was just recently talking with, I'm a statistician. My background, I used to work in the health sciences. Then I went into nursing research. Now I do analysis for the provincial government. I've been communicating with someone about all of the stats they provide on criminality and criminality and race in the U.S. And this person is arguing that basically only white people should be citizens because, it's clear from the stats to them that, it's fun. To them, it's clear from all the stats that basically all the people of non-European descent are responsible for a huge amount of the violence, etc. And they should more or less all be sent back to where they came from. Certainly denied citizenship. So, my general objective to broaden. Yeah, but this person and I actually discussed stats to the point where he was like, "Can you review the following tables and charts I've made and tell me if they're accurate?" And they were very much not. And that's actually where everything died, because as soon as I said, and I went through a statistical analysis of here's where you've gone off the rails, this person's gone completely silent. I would love to think that they're rethinking, but I doubt it. So is any of this a good use of my time? I don't know. Probably there are much better routes, honestly. Part of it is that it's also an outlet. As much as I take abuse, the odd time that somebody says, I wasn't aware of all that, I'm really rethinking. I've had people come back to me who were heavily anti-vax and come back to me and said, you know what, you listened to me, you didn't mock me, and the information you gave me was interesting, and I've read up, and now I'm asking more questions. I'm just it's a bit of a high, honestly. So it's very selfish in some ways, and no, I'm not sure in terms of the greater good for the world that this is the route to go. I'm not. And I'm open to, if people want to say, your time honestly would be more effectively spent doing something else, tell me. And I'll at least consider it, right?
All right, if we can hold that thought, because we do have Jake 4D has been holding for about 5 or 6 minutes, so I want to get him in. And I think we already agreed, so we're going to have the show run a little long, which is perfectly fine. I think it's an interesting topic, and I think a lot of things to say. So I'd definitely like to continue with that. Jake 4D is the one who asked the question about define God, so my guess is he has a few questions about that, and I hope he'll chime in on where we just were, too, because I think that was interesting. Anybody else wants to call in? The number is 1-406. 4 in time. There's about a 4 or 5 minute waiting, because we just want to let people, go in, but we're going to be bringing Jake 4D in now. And then, of course, we will also be continuing this off in the Discord. But I think, we got at least a half hour left. So, Jake, you are now live. So, Jake, how are you? Oh, you can't hear it? Yeah, we hear it. Well, you hear a lot of background noise. It sounds like you're on the road. The road sounds spectacular. It sounds like it's a great road. Not a lot of potholes. So I think you're doing great. There is this line has a decent amount of lag to it too, which I think I finally found a way to get around. But it's of course going to involve changing how the entire system works.
No, but we heard.
Oh, you know what?
We heard words for a minute there. Can you try again?
Well, let me. You know what? And maybe also he's not hearing us, so I'm going to just double check and make sure that the sound is going out. You know what? The sound may not be going out, and I think I know why. We had an issue earlier, and I changed something, so let me try to change it back. So, Jake, if you could stand by one, please. I suspect, yeah, he's probably not getting sound on.
Yeah, he said he can't. He said he can't hear us.
Yeah, he's not. Okay, he's not getting sound, and I suspect I know what the issue is. It's going to take me 1 second, I think, to fix that. So while I fix that, is Andrew, what were you about to say? This is going to take a minute. So you were about to say something. Marianne was talking about.
I don't suppose he knows finger spelling. I just finger spelled talk, Jake.
Well, we of course can hear him, but what I want to do is I know what the issue is, and we what happens, of course, and this is just especially when I get tired in the middle of a show, I suddenly make a change to accommodate one circumstance in the show, and I forget to change things back, and the audio had to be changed on this, and I did not succeed in changing it back. So what I'm going to do right now is fix the setting back. But if we can, while he waits, he's being very patient, which I appreciate. In fact, I may actually return him to the queue in a sec while he waits. What were you saying, as Andrew? Because you I think, wanted to bring something up about her, because this is just unfortunately going to take a minute.
Oh, I don't bring it up to suggest that you're wasting your time or anything. People have to decide where they best fit. And for you, having that one person who goes, oh well, maybe. It's a great feeling when you're trying to make a point to somebody, especially somebody who just doesn't seem particularly receptive, and then you make that point, and they suddenly realize, that either they're holding a double standard or something is irrational about what they've been saying, and when you can finally point it out to somebody and they finally stop and go, oh, well, now I've got to think about something. Getting people to actually think about, especially their assumptions, think about things that they've just had regurgitated in their face over and over and over again, and they just accept it and don't actually think about it. It's like I don't want to say that, because of course, when everybody thinks they're above average, at least half of them have to be deluded.
Yeah.
So, but I try very hard to listen to arguments from other people, especially if it's an argument against something that I believe in, or that I believe that's against something that I believe in. I still at least try to listen to the points that they're making. I mean, if nothing else, and think about the points that they're making, look at the points that they're making, because if nothing else, I want to be able to understand their argument so that I can dismantle it. And I've had people make arguments to me where I thought I was going to go and dismantle it, and once I got to look into it, they ended up changing my mind. And I like to think that I'm open to having my mind changed. I recognize that I'm sure I have blind spots, and I'm sure that lots of people are going to say, "Oh yeah, you've got plenty of blind spots, and some of the stuff that you believe in that's not crazy." I mean, but I do try, and I try to base the things that I truly believe in and care about, on reasoned thought. I try to look at it from as many angles as I can to develop my. And when you're trying to reach another, reach out and say, hey, let's fix some of these problems, I guess it kind of comes down to what is your actual goal? Is it just an outlet for you, something that you want to do? It's like, I'm going to do this anyway, and I find those few gems out there, and that's great for me, and I feel good, and that's enough for me, or it's like, I want to change the world. I want to make an impactful difference in the world, and then depending upon what your actual goal comes, that's what I guess when it comes down to is what you're doing. I personally don't believe, or don't think, I hate to say believe, don't think that it's the most efficient route would be saying, well, is to couch things in a religious term, and just try and stay away from that entirely and say, look, here's some great, awesome things. Here's some other great, awesome things. These are the things we should be promoting, and try and stay away from, because then you get mired down at how many times have you been asked to the exact same questions, like the very first question I ask you, one of the most common questions you ever get, and I ask those questions, because everything's kind of couched in the religious, in religious accoutrements. So whether it's actual religion or not, because I don't deny that there are very useful things in some of these religions, but there's also some pretty terrible things, and I think that tends to divide people more than
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to give Nick a second in case he's solved his problem here, because I can comment, but I also know he's been waiting.
Yeah,
okay.
he's live, and we can hear him, and he can hear us.
Yeah, I can hear you all now.
That was Marianne's fault.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine. It's just, we have Marianne, and the whole show just goes south.
It's all my religious voodoo, yeah.
It's her magic. It's it's the blasphemy. Yes, Susanna, were you gonna?
I'm going to mute for a moment. I need to go talk to this person who's staring creepily at me outside the window, but I'll be right back.
I think that's wise. All right.
Okay. Good luck.
Yeah. All right. So Jake, I know. So Marianne was about to, I think, answer a question, but I know you also. It sounds like you want to talk more about the.
No,
the
Jake's
God
been waiting long enough.
Let
him go.
Whatever he wants. I think I'm handing the bowl to him, so he can pick wherever he wants to go on this. It's up to you, Jake. So you're here. Let us know. Welcome. And what do you want to talk about?
Thank you. I'm sorry if my background noise is a little high. I'm driving. I'm near the Twilight City, the Forks, Washington. So if it's bad, it's because of the vampires. Yeah, it was about the definition of God. The way you defined God, Marianne, it seems unuseful. The God comes with some necessary baggage, and saying it's the ability to do the ability to do the things that allow us to accomplish Jesus' goal. Is that about right?
I think you could read it again.
That which enables us.
Yeah.
No, that which enables us, whether that is genetic or or cultural or what have you, or a deity. I really don't care. It's how I use the word. But yeah, no, go ahead. I have to admit I missed a couple of words in there that are probably critical. So what's the objection?
The objection is the baggage that comes with the word God. It doesn't seem like it holds the necessary properties to be called God. It's like some cultures view like pantheism, the universe as God, or humans as God, or these kinds of things. And it's not useful in a conversation to have that definition of God.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you want me to respond, or go ahead?
Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I almost never use the word, quite frankly, myself. But where I find it comes in handy is when I am either reading or, like, the church I attend, as much as we deconstruct things, we do have hymns, we do have a lot of the conventional trappings. So I'm constantly running into the words like God and heaven and so on. And there are really only a couple of choices. One is to, toss it all and just say the hell with it. This has too much baggage, and I understand a lot of people do, and that's a choice I respect. It's not my choice. Another one is to constantly be translating. And something they say about learning a foreign language is that you really don't understand the language until you find yourself thinking in it. So if you're constantly translating, you're not really speaking the language, and you're missing a lot. And for me, I've chosen the third route, which is to have an understanding of, like, my particular understanding of the words as I read them, so that I'm not stumbling over them. basically so that I can get to the root of what is being said or sung about or what have you, without constantly like losing the thread or being, diverted to a sidetrack because of language. That's the main use of it for me. And the other use is similar in that when I'm talking to people who are using the word, again, I'm not getting caught up in the word and saying, well, what's your proof of God and all the rest of it. If they are saying, because of God, I can do X, I'm able to just skip over that whole frustration around, what do you mean because of God? What does God mean to you? Where's your proof? And just say, okay, you're able to do X. What do you do with that? So for me, it's a shortcut. So the reason I have a definition for the word is not because I think the word's necessary. I would be quite happy to dispense with it. But because it crops up and because it's a stumbling block, this is really how I manage that stumbling block and not stumble. Does that help? Is he still on the line?
I think it's still... sorry?
I was just asking if you were still on the line. Go ahead.
There is a bit of a delay on the call,
it seems like it still has a barrier there because you still, it sounds like you're still talking past each other at least a bit. Where in the same situation, I would say, okay, I don't think a God would exist, but what, then essentially going same as what you're saying there. It's like, what does that do for you? How does this help us move on? How does it help this be good to each other and all this kind of stuff? But the baggage there is still, they're still thinking of this God concept as a being that affects or controls their life.
Mm-hmm. I guess I don't find it my job to correct that. I find it my job. I've already said my interest is in expanding people's appreciation of things or understanding of things. But more fundamentally than that, my job is finding a way for us to work together, because individuals, as much as they say, an individual can change the world, not alone they can't. And so if we're talking about, if the person's saying, because of God, I'm able to find the strength to go on, and we're talking about what going on means and some project or something we can do together, I'd rather focus on what we can do together than on the fact that, they attribute anything to God. And so I guess I'm just trying to not dismiss what they're saying, but not get overly caught up in it. And I find that the definition I have, which is very vague, I grant you, just kind of smooths that process. But you know what? If it doesn't work for others, that's fine. Because again, I'm all kind of about the practicalities. If it's not practical for you, I'm good with that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that the usefulness of it is definitely contextual. It depends on the situation. It depends on where the conversation came from and is headed to.
But I don't use it, honestly, very much at all.
When I think of God, I've put a lot of thought into what the necessary minimum qualifications for a God to be is. And unfortunately,
Sure.
I couldn't find my notes where I wrote these all down. I want to say I really appreciate that you took the time to write it down and look it up so that you're clear. I wish I could find mine. But so the minimum qualifications for something to be useful with the God label, for me, there's about 5 things. And see if I can remember. Number 1 would be it has to be able to affect base reality, such as suspend, change, or what have you, to whatever base reality is. It has to have it has to be extremely powerful. That would be possibly maximally powerful or possibly omnipowerful, but not necessarily just extremely powerful. It has to be able to do this with basically with its own mind or thoughts. Like it has to be powerful enough to do it with its own thoughts rather than taking a physical action. I go back and forth on whether or not it's required for it to be supernatural. And then the last characteristic, the most important characteristic, is that it has to have agency of some kind. If it doesn't have agency of some kind, then it's some sort of natural force rather than a god. If it's just a natural force, it's not worthy. It doesn't have what's necessary to call it God. One of the reasons it's important. Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, by agency, do you think maybe you mean will? It has to have, like, because if something has no will, then it's, I mean, gravity has no will, for example.
Right, gravity has no will, so it can't be God. The reason I say agency is I want to leave it ambiguous enough for it to be considered, it could be free will, or it could be thoughts and a mind, or it could be agency, something other than that. But it has to have its own agency. It can't just be a natural force.
And all that's fine by me.
Does that make sense?
I mean, well, frankly, I don't dispute anybody's definition of God, but I mean, a lot of that makes sense, absolutely.
And the reason that these characteristics, this minimum definition is important is because I believe humans exist, but I do not believe humans are God. I believe the universe exists, but I don't think that you add anything in any way to the quality of the universe by calling the universe God. It just muddles the conversation.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe the difference is that I don't mind being muddled, as long as I'm able to push through being muddled to some kind of a practical conversation. I mean, I just don't get into metaphysics. I don't get into, I mean, it's interesting to read what different cultures and different individuals have thought about the concept of God, but if it doesn't change anything about how they behave, then, or make any long-term difference, frankly, I don't care. Except purely intellectually, sure. Purely intellectually, all this is interesting.
Well, I think this is you're the kind of person philosophers really detest, because you really won't have conversations with us. You just go like, well, wait a minute, what's the practical reason for? But so I just to try to frame it a touch, it sounds like, I mean, so the metaphysical questions, which are extraordinarily important, I think, to most Christians, for you, if I'm understanding correctly, are really irrelevant. The question is, what are the practical implications of whatever their beliefs are? Is that sort of, so you'd rather not get caught into how many angels can dance on the head of a needle? It's sort of like, okay, how does that help us further the human condition? Is that roughly? Yeah.
My question is always, what can we do with that? So no matter what you tell me, frankly, about, and it doesn't have to be religion, it can be your views on, I don't know, how your body works, right? There's all kinds of wacky theories out there. But I'm like, sure, fine. I mean, that doesn't line up with my understanding, but regardless, what can we do with that? Why are you telling me this? It's a bit harsh, I guess.
Well, not if you actually want to get to practical application of things, instead of getting tied up and trying to overdefine everything. You can say, okay, fine, well, whatever I'll accept whatever definition you want to use for this entity. Let's move past that and get on to what how does this apply to your life? know, something that we can actually act on.
Yeah. For me, the challenge is, though, that if we skip over the word God, what sometimes happens, not often, but it's been my experience, this does happen at times, in things like, you know, when reading the Bible, when talking to people, when singing hymns, you name it, is there is meaning in there when they talk about things like God's world. Well, what does that mean? What is the difference between the world and like the observable world and God's world? And this is something my particular congregation deconstructs all the time. Well, what might the Jews have meant by that? What might that mean to us today? And we get into like, what's the vision of a better world? Is there something we should be working toward? And so sometimes you really can't avoid the word, in that if you're reading references that mention it and if you just completely like bleeped it out, then you're missing kind of the point. So I guess I've just developed this particular view as a workaround in order to be able to pull meaning where it's helpful. And frankly, where it's not helpful or where there's no need to introduce the word God, I don't. I mean, you might be surprised how rarely this comes up. I get questioned about it a whole lot more than I actually use it.
All right. Well, so Jake is entering, and again, if anybody wants to call in, I think we're going to start wrapping it up reasonably soon. But if anybody wants to call in the last few minutes, 1-4064 in time. So I know as Endring had at least one other point. I'm sure Jake is mulling over a few more things that he wants to say. So I was going to ask, because you had brought in Jesus into the definition, but you'd actually covered that very well last time. So I think I'm going to new material and see if anyone else has a question. I'm trying to stay reasonably out of it. It's not my natural instinct.
Oh, well, there's a whole conversation about slime mold having agency. All hail our
Marianne,
overlord, I guess.
I was curious if you would use the definition or the label as atheist for yourself, that you don't really care whether or not a God exists. But
yeah, sure. I actually brought it up in the previous show, and I'm quite comfortable with it. I think I said at that time. I'm an atheist about anything that I don't find useful. And I only find the concept of God useful when I'm dealing with either people or readings or other sources that use it where it's not avoidable. Again, you can't bleep it out. You really need to think about what is meant by this. But aside from that, sure. I mean, just in daily life, I've got no particular interest. For those who don't know, atheist it's a genuine word. I was all excited. I thought I invented it at one point, and Wikipedia very quickly disillusioned me. So apathy and theism, the idea that it's not a lack of belief so much as a dismissal of the importance of belief. It's saying it doesn't matter whether you believe in a God or not. It's not a useful concept. So, yeah.
And unless Xander has a specific question, which I'm not sure he does, that one thing that I would, just to bring it back to what Titan had said earlier. But it does matter to people who say that those beliefs can bring a great deal of harm. And so what, am I retreading on something you covered, or is that, because I can see people saying, well, if you don't, how can you not care about something that on one side brings so much comfort to so many people, and on another side is used to justify so many atrocities? Isn't not caring saying, you know what, if you want to commit atrocities, go ahead?
I think one can care about the atrocities and care about why they're happening without being invested in the concepts that are being used to justify them. I guess what I'm saying is I don't have that investment, but I also acknowledge that investment is what drives some people, right? I mean, I'm not saying these concepts are unimportant. I'm saying that in my life, I find them unimportant, in that there's just frankly so much else to do. Like, are we really going to get into, you gave the example of the angels on the head of a pin, but are we really going to argue about whether God can exist or not? And yeah, I mean, I hear you about the whether or not things like Twitter are pointless. People get into this stuff like this is the reason for being, is just to fight on this one particular issue. And I'm like, do you not have better things to do? Like what is your objective here? I don't generally find it useful to make those arguments. I just don't. But that is none. Like, I find arguing that a waste of time. But I find looking at the fact that people are using that as an excuse for atrocities, which I have never denied, that's significant for sure. And
Right.
I hear the objection that as identifying as a Christian and using the word God is in some way justifying or feeding into that rationale, which is, yeah, I hear the argument. I don't know what else to say.
And I want to know if Xandering had any final thoughts or questions, and then if Jake had any final thoughts or questions. I think we're going to close any more calls coming in. So we'll have Xandering see what he wants to say on it, and then Jake, and we'll wrap it up, I think. And then we'll go on to the Discord for anyone who wants to join us there.
Can I add something? Well, they might be thinking of any further questions.
Yes, please.
I just want to add that I'm so often told that I'm some kind of unicorn, that, great that you think this way, but it doesn't really matter because, you're one little, particle floating in an ocean of yada yada. And I just really have to encourage people to look and see what is out there. As I said, the Quakers is only one place to start, but it's a good place to start. And look at the history of the people who have taken this kind of approach where they're like, we don't need to agree on the facts. The United Church that I'm part of, United Church of Canada, very different than United Church in other countries, has the same attitude. We don't have to agree on the dogma. We do have to find ways to work together. And I would encourage people to just not dismiss everything as, well, that was fun, but it's kind of pointless because we're talking to one individual who's just like alone in the world. And look at how many people are working in this area and the things they do. Just open your eyes to that. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I always find it appreciative too when you come across somebody who's done a lot of thinking about their positions and challenges other people to actually think about their positions, especially when they have an altruistic goal about it. They're not just out there saying, "Oh, well, you're just wrong," and trying to force people out of beliefs that the person arguing thinks is wrong or believes is wrong, whether they are or not. But to come across somebody who wants people to actually think about their positions, wants to make the world a better place and get people thinking along better lines, I'm always appreciative when I run across those. So it's been great.
Thank you.
All right,
Is Jake still on the line?
Yeah, I want to say, Nick, I hope you're feeling better. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Marianne. You have a very different perspective, and I very much enjoy hearing a different perspective. When about 5 or 10 years ago, when I was a Christian, I was a different sort of atheist Christian. And on stream a couple of days ago, I met a Christian in very different beliefs as well. One thing I always like to say is remember that we have no empathy for those we don't know. We do kind of like build models in our brains of people we've never met, so we do have some base empathy. But it's important to get out there and talk to people who have different perspectives than you, who have different beliefs than you, who think and act differently than you. So we should get out there and build those relationships, build that understanding, and build that empathy.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know if you can see the screen, but I'm like double thumbs up. Absolutely. I mean, building empathy and learning to listen. I don't know that there are more important goals, because from that we can build almost anything, right? And without that, then we're all in our own bubbles, somewhat selfish bubbles, and we've seen where that takes us. So, I tease Miles or Nick a lot with this. I'm always throwing an amen at him. So just because I know he hates it. So amen, absolutely.
Oh, you just couldn't let it go. So, all right,
No.
well, if you've gotten this far in the stream, hopefully you enjoyed it. Like and subscribe really helps us in the algorithms. And you know what? I think this is a good topic. So if you want to share a link to this to your friends, if you think there's anything worthwhile in it, or even just, timestamp and a link or a clip of it, we're about, people having these discussions. So please pass it around. We're going to be going to the Discord. I need to rest, so I will unfortunately probably not be joining the Discord, but like Marianne has said, she will be able to be there. Xandring,
in about 10 minutes.
All right.
Give me a small window, but I will be there. Yes.
Wonderful. She has an argument she needs to finish on Twitter. And then tomorrow we'll be doing a rundown. Next week is Xandring and I will be talking to Pat. I want to say Lowinger. I've forgotten. If I can read his name. I was going to say if I can read it, I can remember it. If I need to read it, I don't remember it. But at any rate, I can pronounce it correctly if I see the name. And about the U.S. history in Afghanistan, which is really a pretty poor one. And again, I'm very glad because of Xandring having some personal experience none of us have in a perspective. I'm going to be very glad to have Xandring there. So all that notwithstanding, I do want to end on this, which I thought was interesting. Titan said one thing and probably describes more than a few people I know, and certainly people who have shared the stage on In Time, present company included. For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For want of a horse, the messenger was lost. For want of the message, the battle was lost. For want of the battle, the war was lost. Every voice matters. Marianne, thank you very much for indulging us for a third time. As Xandring, it is always a pleasure to have you here, so thank you very much. Jake, thank you for calling. Thank you to our audience, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Oh, and I actually just realized, yeah, there we go. All right, thank you all. Good night.